How difficult should zombies be? Was Cold War Zombies too easy? Were Black Ops 4's Easter eggs too difficult? And what makes a good zombie player good? All of these questions and more here on the third episode of the Mystery Box Podcast. Good morning, you beautiful people. I hope you guys are having a wonderful day today. Today we are talking about everything and anything zombie difficulty. This is a hot topic nearly every year Call of Duty Zombies comes out because it seems that, at least from when I started playing zombies, which was primarily in Black Ops 3, Black Ops 3 was the easiest zombie game ever, and oh my goodness, this is so much easier. And then Black Ops 4 comes out, and holy crap, this is the easiest zombie game ever. It has specialists and equipment and all this stuff. And then Cold War released, and oh my goodness, that's now the easiest zombie game ever released. So we're seeing a trend towards easier and easier experiences. And for a lot of people, that's very concerning, and that's for a multitude of different reasons that we're going to talk about today. But I'm going to start off this podcast with a controversial opinion. Zombies, at its gameplay, the core gameplay, at its core, zombies, is a lot harder than we give it credit for here in the YouTube scene. Now, let me try to clarify that statement. Call of Duty, when people, the general population, think about Call of Duty, I think 9 times out of 10, they're thinking about the campaign, the multiplayer, and probably now Warzone, even like Spec Ops and maybe like Modern Warfare 3 Survival or something. Those game modes have a very traditional first-person shooter way of playing the game, taking cover, aim down sight speed, reaction times, accuracy, aiming, all that stuff. Movement, maybe drop shotting, jump shotting a little bit, just knowing when to take your hits, taking cover, all that sort of stuff. If you know how to do those things really well, you can probably transfer those skills over to different types of multiplayer and different types of campaign missions and all of that sort of stuff. But when you take all of those things that you play Call of Duty for, and then you go to zombies, not really any of those things are relevant. It doesn't matter how accurate you are. Yes, of course, you want to go for headshots, but it's not like a life or death thing. Usually, there's no such thing as taking cover from zombies. Like, you're not going to stand in a head glitch and win and do better in zombies because of that. Zombies is, at its core, a fundamentally different game, mechanically different game, and in my opinion, the zombies team, and well, this is going to sound bad, I don't think the zombie mode does enough to tell the player how to be successful in zombies. Zombies is more akin to that old game that you had on the old Nokia phones, Snake. Do y'all remember Snake? Is Snake still a thing? It's where you're a worm or a snake and you have to eat the dots. And the strategy of the game, the skill of the game, is that you can't run into your own body, and after you eat a dot, your body gets bigger, and you have to maneuver around that little box or map or whatever it is to eat the most dots. That is basically like hoarding zombies from a top-down view. Every single zombie is like another dot that you're eating that goes onto your train that you're training in front of. And so when it comes to things like cover and ADS speed and like little movement like slide canceling and that sort of thing, it doesn't really matter at all. And what matters more, what the biggest impacts of zombies, a zombie player's success, at least in terms of their skill on the sticks or movement, is micro movements, is training, is understanding how you manipulate the zombie AI. And you could see this pretty easily when you look at somebody's first time playing zombies. They don't have that movement. They don't have that rhythm or that feel of, I'm going to move this way and create a gap in the zombies this way and go around the zombies here. It's a lot different than what a seasoned zombie player looks like. Even in a game like Cold War, which a lot of people think is the easiest zombie game, that core foundation of movement and training is not necessarily conveyed to players. When you go into a public match, as you see in the gameplay behind you, this is a public match of Forsaken, and 2 of these players, it's clear and obvious that they don't really have an understanding of how to train, how to play zombies, and I know from experience they don't know how to rank up their weapons, they don't know how to buy armor, and I'm sure they don't know much of anything else other than spawn in and shoot zombies. Now, Black Ops 4 did attempt to alleviate a little bit of this player misinformation by trying to inform the players with a traditional tutorial mode. This tutorial mode lasted like 5 minutes, and it did a great job at introducing the absolute basics of the mechanics of zombies. Like, this is a zombie, kill it. The killing zombies get you points, which open doors, which buy you perks, you can revive your allies. But other than that, other than the absolute basics, it really didn't tell the player, hey, You can train. You don't need to shoot the zombies that are in front of you. You can go around them and horde them behind you. You can camp in this certain spot and use these as a strategy to camp in this and survive here. The more intricate and detailed ways of how players actually survive and how they actually get better at zombies, we have not really seen conveyed in a zombie mode quite yet. But then, of course, that begs the question, what makes a good zombie player good? And no matter who you are, I think the very first thing that a good zombie player has to learn is movement, is how to maneuver in and around the zombie horde. They have to learn how to train, and most importantly, they have to know how to traverse the map mid-round. These are things that are really difficult to articulate because it's not like that traditional first-person shooter experience where you take this cover, then go to this cover, then kill these enemies. No, it's more of a move in this sort of way to move the zombie into this position so you can go around that zombie and get to where you want to go. Or you can avoid being cornered and trapped and all that sort of thing. The tighter the play space is, the harder that map tends to be. We see this point articulated very well when you compare something like Black Ops 1 Ascension, where it's big and wide open and there's lots of places to train, lots of places to not just train, but maneuver around the zombies. The hallways are really wide. And then you move on over to Shangri-La, where all the passageways are super narrow. There's traps and stuff slowing you down, and the mud room trying to trap you into one particular way of going. And Shangri-La is one of the hardest maps in the series. Same thing with Verrückt, where that's one of the most tight, close-quartered combat areas, and that's one of the hardest maps. And that transfers all the way up to Black Ops 4, where you have like 9, where you have a huge wide open arena, that starting room, and 9 is pretty chill. It's pretty easy, even though there's like 24 special enemies thrown at you all the time. It's not really regarded as a difficult map. But then Voyage of Despair, on the other hand, where it's really close quartered and tight and there's a whole bunch of boss zombies, it's one of the hardest maps to be successful in casually. And so the base fundamental skill that makes every single zombie player successful is knowing how to train and how to, we'll say, like, juke zombies. But the cool thing is, after that moment, after you're comfortable with training in a certain spot, after you're comfortable with juking enough zombies mid-round, there's really not all that much physical skill that zombies asks from you. And as a lot of you beautiful people commented on one of my recent polls here, a lot of skill in zombies comes down to knowledge. Whether that's knowledge on how certain special enemies work, knowledge on how wonder weapons are acquired, or it's just basic map knowledge, or it's knowledge on these specific mechanics, or how to get this. Zombie skill, or training spots, camping spots, whatever, the better you are as a zombie player tends to go more in line with how much you know. Now, this is pretty darn good for me and other zombies YouTubers because videos and stuff on how to get better and the more stuff you know is a lot about knowledge and just sharing, hey, here's a pro tip. Hey, here's what you do in this situation. And it's very surface level. But that's not only good for the community and talking and getting everyone talking together, but it's also really good for growing the fan base because, as we said, traditional Call of Duty media like 6v6, Warzone, even campaign can feel very intense. It's a very competitive way of playing. But you go to zombies and nowhere, at least hardly ever, I would say, do the zombies feel really intentionally out to get you. Obviously, they're zombies, they're going to horde you, but it never feels like unfair in any sort of situation. It never feels malicious, like the developers want to kill you, like they would want to kill you in a campaign or how other people want to kill you in a 6v6. No, you are only as good as you are invested. And the more invested you get, the more knowledge you have, the more practice you have, the better and easier zombies becomes as a mode. So that skill floor might not be super clear, but that skill ceiling is really as high as you want it to be. And that's one of the core pillars of the mode that we're going to see throughout this podcast, because if you want to challenge yourself and complete this really difficult Easter egg, you can do that. If you want to challenge yourself and just survive all of these rounds, you can do that. Zombies is such a unique experience because the success state, what it looks like to be successful in zombies, isn't the same across all players. Whereas if you go into 6v6, what a successful player looks like there is, well, you win a lot of objectives and you kill a lot of people. That's how you mark a successful 6v6 player. Or Warzone, you have the most wins. But for zombies, success isn't just completing the main Easter egg, and success isn't just surviving the most rounds, it's kind of just having fun, and whatever that means to you. It's such a great, relaxed mode, but you can still have those moments of challenge and put more onto yourself to complete those Easter eggs and complete those main quests. It's a really fascinating thing about the skill of zombies. When researching this topic and trying to think of what I wanted to say on this podcast, I was really tempted to be like, does zombies even take that much skill? But that's not really authentic because zombies does take a lot of skill. Going to high rounds, going to round 200 or 935, whatever the highest round is, it takes skill. But the difference is that skill is kind of just at whatever level you want it to be. If success to you is getting to round 30, then you're a skilled zombies player. If you wanted to get to round 50 or complete this side quest or do this Easter egg, you could be successful in a multitude of different ways. And I thought that was fascinating about zombies, and it really is one of the reasons why I love the mode. With all of that being said, if it's true that you kind of get to determine your own success, why does it seem like the developers are making everything easier and easier for players? And we could talk about so many mechanics here. I mean, armor, zombie damage, player health, the shield versus the armor, super sprinters, rampage inducer, specialists, field upgrades, equipment, all this sort of thing. There's so many different aspects to zombies now. It's really difficult to isolate one thing that makes the difficulty easier or harder. But when it comes to certain things, the more I've been playing Cold War Zombies and the more that I've been playing zombies in general, the better I get as a zombies player, the more I like the challenge, the more I see the appeal of certain barriers in place that you have to jump over. For example, the 2 to 3 to 5 hit down system, right off the bat, I was a huge defender of the 3 hit down back in Black Ops 3. I remember the 3 hit down was sort of controversial. Some people didn't like it because, back in my day, we only had 2 hits and it made it so much more scary and terrifying and vulnerable and that sort of thing. But the 3 hit down system I thought was a really well balanced and fair way of playing zombies. You had the traditional, like video gamey design of strike 1, strike 2, up, strike 3, you're done. And that felt very good. And you felt very vulnerable in that early game still. But then once you got Juggernog and your Wonder Weapon, you felt a little bit more comfortable. And when Cold War came out, we got the 5 hit down system and Juggernog and armor. And it really didn't affect me all that much. I really didn't notice it because I was having fun with the game. I really love the progression of Cold War Zombies. But looking back at it now, there is something really fundamentally different about those early games in Cold War. And especially with me playing custom mods and custom maps recently, I really feel that vulnerability of those early rounds in classic zombies. And for future reference, this is a long video here. When I say classic zombies, that refers to anything World at War to Black Ops 3. So if I say classic zombies, that's what I'm talking about. I will specify Black Ops 4 or Cold War because they're kind of different games. But anyway, classic zombies had a feeling of vulnerability that Black Ops 4 and Cold War especially really just don't have. And I feel like this was such a missed opportunity, especially in Cold War, because, Black Ops 4 didn't have Jug, so they really didn't have a lot of stuff to play around with. But in Cold War, you have Juggernog and you have armor, so you have the potential for players to be very vulnerable and then get Juggernog and armor and become very protected. There is a narrative around Cold War and especially Black Ops 4 that the progression is just not as satisfying as it was in classic zombies. And I would disagree with that because I've said in previous videos, you have way more to progress in Cold War. You have weapons and armor and perks and 3 tiers of Pack-a-Punch. There's so much more to progress in Cold War that I will defend that Cold War progression. And even in Black Ops 4, I think there's, Wonder Weapon side quests and perks and Pack-a-Punch still to upgrade and progress more than classic zombies. But I would argue that I don't think it's just the straight progression that players are frustrated with. I think it's the fact that there is a lack of vulnerability and weakness to the player at the beginning of the match. When you start Black Ops 4 with your elixirs and specialist and equipment, yes, you may progress further, and in Cold War you might have all of those things. You might progress further and become stronger than ever before in zombies, but you didn't start as weak as you did in classic zombies. You never start as weak as you did in classic zombies in Black Ops 4 and Cold War, and that, I think, is a very important emotion for zombie players to feel. as I've gone back and I've played custom mods and custom maps and even just traditional Black Ops 3 maps, it is very satisfying to have just a crappy pistol and literally nothing else. I mean, I guess grenades, but just a crappy pistol, maybe some self-revives because it's modern zombies. I'm fine with self-revives. But to start with absolutely nothing and get a decent weapon and then get a great weapon and then get all your perks, that type of progression is way more satisfying than in Cold War, where you start with, you know, the XM4 and even just like Frost Blast or something, and then you progress through all that stuff. It's not necessarily the amount of stuff you've progressed through, it's where you started from. And that's something that I don't know if they're ever going to revert in zombies, because, you know, Vanguard, you got to pick your weapon, Cold War, you got to pick your weapon. And with the camo grind, this is so scary for me to say, because I'm doing the camo grind in Black Ops 4 right now, and I'm having a whole heap of fun doing the camo grind in Black Ops 4, except for when you're going after a specific weapon that's just in the mystery box. It's incredibly frustrating. So I love the fact that you can just choose whatever weapon you can in modern zombies, but it doesn't feel as satisfying to progress as the classic zombie system. So that's an interesting thing that I didn't think I would actually agree with the majority about, but here we are. Now, in defense of Cold War, there is another mechanic or another thing that I've noticed about zombies lately that has been very different from classic zombies. In classic zombies, when you go down, you lose all of your perks, and it is incredibly punishing. Whereas Black Ops 4, Cold War, Vanguard, you tend to keep some of your perks and even some of your weapons when you die out completely. And there is a shift towards not punishing the player that harshly as we used to back in classic zombies. And a lot of people don't like this, but I think this is for the better. And maybe it's, again, just because I'm playing a lot of custom maps and whatever, but going down in classic zombies is so punishing. It is so ruthless and unrelenting. And then when you mix in the fact with some of those Black Ops 3 maps like Shadows of Evil or Horizon Direct Zetsubo, when you're going through this really intensive and engaging process to turn on Pack-a-Punch or the power, and then you go down before it knocks the wind out of you. And especially, that's me speaking as a more seasoned zombie player. Right now, I kind of just find it annoying and I'll get back up and get whatever. But as I was learning zombies and as I was in that kind of intermediate, which I still think I'm intermediate at zombies, to be honest. But when I was a worse zombie player, I would get so discouraged when I went down and I just go, no, okay, I feel like I don't want to play anymore. Because if you are, as weird as this is to say, if you're bad enough to go down like super early on and you don't feel comfortable, if you don't feel comfortable with zombies and you go down, asking the player who already doesn't feel comfortable to go around the map mid-round and use more of their points to buy Juggernog and Quick Revive and Double Tap all over again, that takes more skill than just simply not going down probably took. And so it's kind of an unbalanced, weird sort of punishment. But that being said, there are always going to be points of frustration. This is zombies after all. I know on my Discord, Michael Does Stuff always says that zombies should kill you. Zombies should make you end the game because of how overbearing and difficult it is. I don't think I agree with that statement, but that is sort of the emotional feeling of zombies. Because it's a horde-based mode, you'd think, you know, after a while, the hordes would just become so overwhelming that you would eventually die. And before Cold War and Easter eggs and all that stuff, that's how all zombie games ended, if you didn't reset, obviously, or Xville before Cold War, of course. But it going down is so exhausting for players. And when you think about how much time it took to get like the Origin staffs, you know, like I've played games of Origins where I've spent like 30 minutes on round 8 or something because I'm trying to get all of the staffs upgraded for the Easter egg or something. And if I were to go down during that, even though I'm only on round 6, how much time have you invested into that game that you're just like, you know what, we'll try again later. I'd rather have a fresh start. And so having things that keep your perks and keep this and do a little bit more towards your favor is something that at least makes it a little bit more tolerable. But as I said, the players are going to feel frustrated. The players are going to go down. The players are going to do something that they shouldn't have. And that's what good video games do. Good video games make the players play the way that is the most fun. And if the player is doing something like not training zombies appropriately or not killing zombies or doing whatever, it's going to be a point of frustration. However, I also recently just rewatched a podcast from NoClip with Hugo Martin, and Hugo Martin is one of the people who developed Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal. If you're a fan of this channel, you know that I'm a huge fan of Doom Eternal. It's probably not the last time it's going to come up in this podcast, but he said that, you know, for players to have that frustration is important, but the most important thing is that the players never feel frustrated with the game itself. They have to put the blame on themselves, which I found really interesting because in like a 2016 interview with Jason Blundell, the former leader of Zombies, he says that the game cannot be too, players can't blame the game for why they went down. They can't be like, well, I went down because that boss is too OP or that happened. They have to blame themselves.
The kind of key thing to kind of tuning in a zombie map is for people to blame themselves, not the game. And that's when you can tell that you actually got your zombie map right. Because we killed you. But when you hear the guy go, I made the wrong decision. I went that way, or I picked up that weapon. Or, you know, when people start blaming like, oh, it's because the map's like that, or because that bad guy has too much power, that's when the problems are. Zombie map kind of balancing is more about when people blame themselves. And
something really special happens when players blame themselves for a mistake that they made. They are encouraged to try again. And in that interview, Hugo Martin said, like, you know, if you ask NBA players who lost the game, yeah, they're frustrated, or NFL players who lost the game, yeah, they're frustrated, but that makes them want to train more and harder and get better. So if our goal for when players are going down or not completing an Easter egg step, which comes into play later in this podcast, if they're failing in some way, if they're within the state of failure of whatever that means for zombies, it has to be the player's fault. If that's what we want, if that's the goal of good game design, then probably one of the most important things of that whole system is player communication, which is what we talked about at the beginning of this podcast. Players need to know exactly why they went down. They have to know why this step failed. And a lot of people's frustrations with zombies, whether that's the basic gameplay, the casual players, you know, getting cornered and trapped and going down and going, I just got overwhelmed. That's not my fault. How do people play this mode? Or that could look like somebody trying to complete an Easter egg, like the mimic step, and then it failing, but the player has no way of knowing why that step didn't fail, or why that step did fail, why they didn't complete it successfully. And the mimic step is actually a perfect example of that, because if you have the knowledge of how it's done, if you watch my guide, link in the description, or in the icon above, then it's a really easy step, and it's not confusing, it's not difficult, and it's perfectly normal. But if you don't really know the step, if you don't really know what you're supposed to do, then you find a mimic, you trap it, you do it, and it's not the one you're looking for, and you complete, and you do that, and you fail over and over again, it's incredibly frustrating. So a lot of the challenge in Zombies is trying to communicate to the player what they're supposed to be doing, which is so difficult to do. It's incredibly difficult to do. I have no idea how we would do it other than making like a tutorial mode, but like a super beefy, huge tutorial mode where it shows you every single aspect. This is how you train, this is how you maneuver. But then even then, with like the mimic step, you can't really, how do you convey that in a way that's really Zombies? Because as we're going to talk about later, Easter eggs are kind of meant to be hidden. They're kind of meant to be not communicated to the player. So it's this weird balance, and that's kind of the zombie mode as a whole. There's a lot of secrecy and unintuitiveness that comes to Zombies that's really frustrating for players, sort of like the old classic 2-hit down system. That's really punishing and really frustrating. But if you can overcome that, if you can overcome those frustrations, if you can overcome and learn and invest, you start to realize how amazing Zombies can actually be. And I think that's why Zombies has such a passionate core fan base that loves the classic era of Zombies, because those people overcame those challenges. When we get games like Black Ops 4 and Cold War, which are easier, it feels almost cheap, like they're not overcoming the same challenge, because they're not. But let's forget the high-level talk and conceptual talk now. Let's do a little bit more specifics here. I want to talk about the Pack-a-Punch animations. This is something that I've absolutely missed so much. I didn't realize how much I missed this. Just the simple act of giving your gun to the Pack-a-Punch and then training around a little bit and then getting your gun from the Pack-a-Punch. In Cold War, it's just a menu, and it worked. It was inoffensive to me, but going back, playing Black Ops 3, playing Black Ops 4 especially, I missed that little mini game. It was an engaging experience to give your gun to the Pack-a-Punch, survive without the weapon you wanted to upgrade for a little bit, and then get it again. I missed that, and I hope it returns. I really do. You could keep The ammo mod's random. You could keep the 3 tiers of Pack-a-Punch the same, but just let me give the Pack-a-Punch my weapon. That's just, I missed it. It was like a little mini game. You know, I just loved it so much. I also want to praise Cold War's Rampage Inducer, one of the best things about Cold War ever, because that was like an in-game difficulty setting, kind of like Black Ops 4 had casual, normal, hardcore, and realistic. The Rampage Inducer was like, hey, this is zombies, but it's a little bit faster, a little bit more intense, and I think it was perfect. I think it was perfect for what it did. And the fact that they changed it to where it could go all the way up to round 55, it's awesome. It's a great challenge. I absolutely love it. It doesn't fix how easy Cold War is, but it does a great job of adding in a layer of difficulty that is so sorely needed in Cold War. And I hope that it keeps on returning. It returned in every single Vanguard round-based map in the Archon and Shinonuma. I hope it's a mainstay of zombies at this point. Same with Exfil. I love Exfil, but that's not really a difficulty thing. That's just more of another thing. I just love the Rampage Inducer. When it comes to equipment, kill streaks, field upgrades, specialists, these are really where I struggle. These are really where I don't know how I feel, because I love absolutely all of them. I really do. I made a video a while ago talking about the Black Ops 4 specialist system because I absolutely adore it. I think it's, and going back and playing it, it's just so much fun. Using Thor's hammer and zombies and just shooting lightning and hitting zombies, it's great. Everybody loves the Forsaken wonder weapon with the Chrysalax. That's just the specialist from Black Ops 4. It's still fun now. It's still fun back then. I get it. You always have it, but I don't think enough people realize that it's not just a get out of jail free weapon all the time. Something like Frost Blast, I think, is way more broken and crutch than the specialist system is. Then again, they're both pretty cheap in certain situations, but Black Ops 4's mechanics were balanced around the specialist system. That's why you had the lesser amount of health in Black Ops 4, and I don't know if a lot of people know this, but the more you activate your Black Ops 4 specialist, the longer it takes for it to recharge. So it's kind of built in a safety feature or an accountability feature that, hey, you can't just spam this whenever you want, whereas I do not believe that's present in Cold War. I think Frost Blast just takes a certain amount of kills every single time to recharge, and you get 3 little Frost Blasts that you can use to essentially do the same thing as a specialist, which is just get zombies out of your way. Now, I wish specialists and field upgrades and equipment and kill streaks were implemented in more of a way that you earned them. I wouldn't mind if there's like a Black Ops 3 specialist, but with Black Ops 4 mechanics where you had to you could create a class at outside, you know. I love how fun they are. I really do. I think they're great. I think they're fun. I think they have a place in zombies. I just wish there's a way that felt satisfying that we can earn it in game. The problem with that is that how do you do that without becoming insanely tedious? Because something like the shield in zombies is a really engaging and fun thing to have in zombies. And I love the zombie shield even more now than I did back in the day. But the worst part about the zombie shield was how tedious it was to build, find, and upgrade, or fix and repair in every single map. It was so tedious, and it genuinely got so annoying to work with. Armor is so much more straightforward, and it's so much less of a hassle to get. I appreciate that aspect too. So I feel like there's really not a good way to implement these things, at least to me, because I'm no game developer. But I do think they're really fun, and I think they have a place in zombies. And Black Ops 4 gets a lot of hate for that early game vulnerability and progression, of course. But once you get to like round 15 or so in Black Ops 3 in classic zombies, you would have had all of your perks. You would have had the wonder weapon, probably, as well as the specialist weapon in Black Ops 3. Round 15 or 20, that's about when you would have had it. So about 15 to 20 in Black Ops 4, I feel like it's really well balanced. I think Black Ops 4 is one of the more fun and yet balanced zombies games that we've had. Going back to Black Ops 3, I feel like it's very limited. I feel like it's almost kind of boring without all of the specialists and equipment and kill streaks and stuff to interact with to keep you there. But I like how challenging Black Ops 3 is. Cold War's on the other side, where there's a lot of fun things to do and a lot of fun things to interact with. But, man, I just feel like Cold War never holds me accountable. I feel like I can do anything in Cold War, and it'll be like, yeah, here you go. Here's your participation trophy. Here's your, yeah, you just basically survived. I feel like there's no real player accountability in Cold War until you start getting to the higher rounds, which I feel like is a problem. I wish I could find this clip, but Hugo Martin, when discussing Doom Eternal versus Doom 2016, he said, in Doom 2016, we gave you that power fantasy. You got all these weapons and all these things, and you got to shoot demons and have fun. But in Doom Eternal, we're still giving you all of these things. In fact, we're giving you more things, but you have to use them now, and you have to earn the right to stay alive. You have to earn the right to get back your ammo and your armor and your health and all of these sorts of things. And the bet was, and the bet, in my opinion, paid off, because Doom 2016 or Doom Eternal is one of my favorite first-person shooters of all time. It paid off in the sense that the power fantasy earned is far more fun and satisfying than the power fantasy that's just given to you. And if we were to translate that into zombies, I think people were more satisfied with the Black Ops 3 specialists because they had to earn it in-game, even though Black Ops 4 specialists might have been more fun from a gameplay perspective. It wasn't as satisfying because the player really didn't earn them. But then we're right back to the question of how do you make players earn something without it feeling incredibly tedious? I want to move and start talking about ammo conservation and that sort of game within a game of ammo management, because you hear ammo management quite a lot in zombies, and you hear a lot about, max ammo's the most iconic power-up drop because, oh my goodness, you saved me because I have ammo now. And I always thought when I got into zombies, ammo management sucks. Like, it's not fun, because that's one of those things that's not within my control. Like, yes, it is to a certain degree, to a certain extent. You can line up zombies and, line them up and use one bullet for multiple zombies and collateral people and all that stuff. But you get just the very nature of zombies. There are more zombies per round, and those zombies have more health per round, that your ammo, your gun, the ability to output damage is not within your control anymore. So yeah, I might try to really be efficient with all of my ammo for as long as possible, but eventually, whether that's round 50 or 75 or 2,000 or whatever, eventually it's going to be beyond my control of how much ammo I have in my weapons. This is something that I'm also finding out with Black Ops 4, because I'm doing the camo grind on casual. I run out of ammo all the time, and it's just not my fault, and that's not really fun. I don't find that challenging. Yes, of course, you can pair certain weapons with wall weapons and this sort of thing, but ultimately, it's just not a core element of zombies that I really enjoy. It's something that I like about Cold War. I love the fact that there are ammo crates in there, and you can just buy ammo, because it's the game being like, you still have to manage this, but we understand that it's not really within your control. So I like that very much. But that might be a controversial take. Another controversial take is, for the longest time, I preferred armor over the shield. And this has been a debate. I posted about this on my channel. A lot of people really like the shield, and a lot of people don't like the armor. And I used to be the opposite. I used to love the armor, hate the shield. Oh my goodness. Like I said before, the shield was so tedious to build, to find all the 3 different parts in 3 different locations. And part of it was me being a YouTuber making guides and like not wanting to make guides for them anymore, and just being like, please just make this simpler. And they did, and it was so much better. But the shield still comes, and something that I never thought, I guess I should say, something I never thought would happen. Going back, playing Black Ops 4, Black Ops 3, I think mechanically, gameplay-wise, I think I prefer the shield. But both the shield and the armor have a really core problem that is one of the most frustrating things in all of zombies, at least to me. When you're playing zombies, and you have like a hellhound or a super sprinter or just a fast zombie or something, you're working in close quarters, you need to maneuver around the zombies, and you get hit, and your armor takes damage, your shield takes damage, and it is not within your control. This is very, very hard. The shield, at the very least, and the reason that I prefer it, at the very least, you have some control of whether or not your shield gets hit. When you're going by a zombie, you can either turn, oh man, I apologize. You can either turn towards it or turn away from it to determine whether or not your shield takes any damage or not. With armor, you just get hit, and nowhere is that more apparent than in Vanguard Zombies. Oh my goodness, I don't know if you've gotten to a high round in Vanguard Zombies lately, but those guys hit you from like a football field away, and there's nothing you can do about it. They are super sprinting on round like 30, and they hit you all the time. It is insane how quickly you go through armor in Cold War and Vanguard at the higher rounds. That being said, the armor does something so much better than the shield ever did, and that is armor vests and armor shards, or armor plates if you play multiplayer. Having those drop from zombies naturally is so much better than the shield ever was. Carpenters fixing them in Black Ops 4 and Cold War, beautiful. Please keep that. That is amazing. I love that. Max armor drop in Vanguard. Yeah, cool, whatever. But the worst thing about armor and the shield is when you have to repair it. I cannot tell you how frustrating it is when you're playing a game of zombies, when you're training. I'm a big trainer. I love training. But when I get hit from zombies and you have a health system like the armor system where it's non-regenerative, right? Regenerative health works so well in zombies because you get hit, the game expects you to get hit, but if you go long enough without getting hit, your health regenerates. That's perfect. As soon as you put on armor, especially when it's tied so closely to your health like it is in Cold War and Vanguard, it becomes one of the most tedious aspects about Vanguard and Cold War, and something that I didn't really pay attention or notice until I did. And once I did notice, oh my goodness, I kind of actually hate it. Because when you get hit in zombies, most of the time, I want to say when you get hit the 1 or 2 times, right? If you get hit and you go down, it's more or less your fault. I feel like that's a very fair balance that zombies has had for basically its entire lifetime. But when you get hit on that one time where that one zombie's super sprinting at you, or you're trying to turn this corner, or you're trying to go into this room, and you get that hellhound or that plague hound who jumps on you and hits your shield or hits your armor, that is, for all intents and purposes, unavoidable. And when that happens at those higher rounds where there's a lot of enemies that you have to go through, and you're going through a long round, at a certain point in time, you have to stop what you're doing, train the zombies up, and then go down to the arsenal station, get your armor, or go down to the shield, repair your shield, and then go back up and then resume playing the game. That's the worst part about this ammo system in Cold War with the ammo crates, even though they're kind of everywhere, they're kind of nice. Mainly it's the armor system and the shield system back in Black Ops 4, where I want to be playing, I'm playing zombies because I want to kill zombies, because I'm there for the gameplay, I'm there for the shooting, the training, the killing, the camping. That's why I love zombies, is that strategy with the zombies. But when I'm low on my shield, when I'm low on my armor, I have to stop playing the game, I have to put the game on pause, go all the way across the map, or go around the map, whatever, repair my stuff, go all the way back, and resume playing the game. Once again, Hugo Martin talks a lot about this fun zone, and it's the zone where they want players to be in. It's the zone where players have the most fun. And for me, it's that killing zombies, training zombies, camping zombies. And when I have to repair that, I have to stop doing what is fun and go do a chore and go do this side quest that is not fun. What Doom Eternal did is that it used those things, because Doom Eternal doesn't have regenerative health. You have to get health packs. You have to have armor, kind of exactly like Cold War, and it doesn't have unlimited ammo. So what Doom Eternal did was that it said, hey, if you want more health, you have to do this cool melee finisher in order to get more health. If you want more armor, you have to light enemies on fire in any one of these ways in order for them to drop armor shards. Now, if you want more ammo, you have to use this chainsaw that has a cooldown on it to chainsaw more ammo out of your enemies. It's really bombastic, it's Doom, but I think zombies could have a really interesting gameplay loop similar to that, where even if we just stole the armor thing straight from Doom Eternal, if you threw a Molotov in a horde of zombies and they all dropped armor plates and armor vests, and that was how you regened your armor, if they, you used electric damage to get more points. I made a video on this, but I love the idea of doing fun things, rewarding you with things that would otherwise be tedious. And it's just a fun little idea that I've had for a long time, and it's something that I wish zombies did a little bit more of, because there's really no real incentive, no real reason to have players use kill streaks or equipment or anything other than the basic function of whatever it is. Yes, the RCXD is really cool because it kills a group of zombies, but so does every other kill streak. So why would you use one over the other? And I think that would be a really cool way of incorporating all of these different things to reward the player with different abilities and resources and all of that sort of thing. But that's kind of a side tangent. And it's almost to the point where Cold War, maybe Black Ops 4, but mainly Cold War, almost has too many mechanics in it. And the reason I say that is because if we take a look at the gameplay that I showed you earlier of the Forsaken gameplay public match, these two players didn't have any idea how to upgrade their armor, how to get armor, or how to upgrade their weapon. Now, I know this because I got the Crystal Axe from the trials and I dropped it in front of one of them. They picked it up and they were using a red create a class tier stoner for like the first 20 rounds. I think we were on around like 15 or 20, and they were using that the whole time. And oh my goodness, how does that happen? Neither of them. I was trying to like melee them, type in chat, shoot at them, trying to bring them up to the armor station, to the whatever you call that, the upgrade station. None of them followed me. So I thought about, how does Treyarch communicate, hey, you should upgrade your weapons and armor in the arsenal station? And the only thing I can think of is the loading screen, where it has that Warzone style multiplayer, like survive, upgrade, whatever that third one is. I don't know what it is, because who reads those things? The two of them. Now, granted, they're there, and it's probably the best they could do without actually just spotlighting, hey, go here, putting an icon on that. But it just goes to show you that the players, no matter how easy you make zombies, and this is a message to Treyarch, honestly, Cold War is one of the easiest zombie games. It's so incredibly easy. I feel like it doesn't hold the players accountable enough, and we still have players not engaging with the armor system, not engaging with the weapon leveling system. So at that point, you have to make a decision and go, some people are going to miss out. So, we could do all we can to try to push the players in this direction, but this game won't be for everyone. At some point, a player's failure is their fault. We cannot make games, and this is what I'm ultimately afraid of about Cold War. We can't make games that keep lowering the bar, because ultimately what's missing from Cold War is any sort of substantial challenge. Yes, the Outbreak Legion boss fight is pretty challenging, but when compared to classic Easter eggs, it's not super challenging, at least to me, at least after the nerfed version of it now. The high rounds in Cold War would be challenging, except there's a whole bunch of different tools and resources to use. Yes, it's pretty balanced, and it's the most challenging aspect about Cold War Zombies, but that main core gameplay is just a little bit too accessible, to the point where I don't feel the pull or the desire to play Cold War Zombies as a challenge anymore. Surviving rounds in Cold War doesn't feel satisfying anymore. And as weird as this is, completing Easter eggs in Cold War doesn't feel satisfying to me anymore either. And when you want a really passionate and hardcore audience that follows you, I think you need to have that challenge. You need to have something to where players can come back and say, hey, I want to try 9 with these different weapons. I want to try, and I guess the Legion boss fight's a good example of, I want to try this boss fight with these different weapons and this different strategy. And in Cold War, even with the Legion boss fight a little bit, mainly with the other bosses, I feel like there really isn't that replayability to Cold War because of the difficulty. But that transitions us into the high round problem that all of Call of Duty Zombies has. What makes a good high round player in Zombies? You can answer this question in a completely different way for every single Call of Duty Zombies title. The best practices, the best strategies of high rounds has been so completely inconsistent from game to game. It is very, very weird. In World at War and Black Ops 1 and I think Black Ops 2, a lot of players relied on traps and wonder weapons to get to those high rounds. Call of the Dead and Nuketown couldn't get to high rounds because they didn't have any traps and they didn't have any infinite damage wonder weapons. So the difficulty of those high rounds was capped by the game. And you'll notice with what we've established, that's not great. That's a frustrating point that makes those maps not so replayable. Yes, they're challenging, they're difficult, but it's not the player's fault that they're not reaching those high rounds. And this is something that I've always thought, honestly, from when I first started playing zombies, I always found it weird that all of your weapons, you could use 32 different weapons or however many weapons there are at the start of a zombies game or a Call of Duty game. You have so many different weapons you can use, assault rifles, SMGs, shotguns, all this stuff. And then you get around like 40, 50, and they all suck. And they funnel you into using the wonder weapon. And I always thought that was super frustrating and super just discouraging. Like, why go to high rounds when the game is going to be like, congratulations, you survived all these rounds. Now your stuff doesn't work. So I'm a big proponent. I'm a huge believer in giving players tools to be successful even in the high rounds, which is why I like the specialists, which is why I like equipment and kill streaks and the alternate ammo types from Black Ops 3, because in Black Ops 3, it was kind of the same with traps and all the stuff, but you had Deadwire, Turn, and Blast Furnace to also enhance and make sure that every weapon was viable in high rounds. Now, that became a problem because, hey, it really wasn't the weapon that you were using, it was the alternate ammo type. And Deadwire on this gun is the same as Deadwire on that gun, which is the same as Deadwire on that gun, and that became sort of tedious and repetitive. Even though I think that's more preferable to what we had before because it didn't gatekeep you from those high rounds just because, hey, we don't have a wonder weapon for you. Or, hey, you don't feel like using the Thunder Gun for 24 rounds and then putting it in the mystery box and then pulling it from the mystery box and then pack-a-punching it. Super tedious high rounds back in the day. Then moving on to Black Ops 4, we got specialists, and a lot of the high round strategies really were around these specialist weapons. And then you could use your infinite damage wonder weapons to kind of counterbalance that, or you could use your infinite damage ballistic knife. But the most important thing about Black Ops 4, and the coolest thing that it introduced, at least conceptually, was the health cap. The health cap is a beautiful thing, and I absolutely love it. I know it also spawned the Helion Salvo wonder weapon, which I'm neither here nor there about the Helion Salvo. People think it's annoying and bad, but when you look at the strategies, the high round strategies of Black Ops 4, not all of them use the Helion Salvo. A lot of them do because it's a really good safe weapon, but I love stuff like Ancient Evil's Care on Hand with Bloodwolf Blood. I absolutely love that. I think that's amazing. But the high rounds of Black Ops 4 get a little bit more engaging to me because it's not just ammo mods. You can still use ammo mods. Nobody does because you have the Helion Salvo and you have infinite damage wonder weapons and specialists, but at least you're using a little bit more mechanics. Also introduced in Black Ops 4 and moving on to Cold War is super sprinters. Now, super sprinters I used to love so much. I loved the fact that, hey, this is a different way to challenge players in high rounds, because before, high rounds were almost too easy in Black Ops 3 because all you needed was Deadwire. But with super sprinters, it changed up the core gameplay after round 50 or whatever, and that was really awesome. But as I've seen with my own gameplay and kind of the gameplay I've seen in just the general audience, training is basically non-existent. And I think it's because of the super sprinters. Training is a very safe strategy. But with super sprinters, and combined with the armor problem that we talked about, that they're super sprinting at you, yes, everyone has a stamina in Cold War, which is an awesome thing about that perk system. But even though everybody has stamina up and they can technically outrun super sprinters, they still get hit more frequently in those higher rounds. And in Cold War, introduced in Cold War, zombies deal more damage to the player in high rounds, which is, we could talk about this so much because how fair is that? That in the beginning rounds, they hit you for like 30 health, but in the higher rounds, they hit you for like 75, 100 health. You're like a 2-hit down at round 100, but you're like a 12-hit down on round 2. It kind of does make sense because as you progress through the rounds, they're supposed to be more challenging, but that also clashes with the idea that as you progress through the rounds, you're supposed to be stronger as a player. So we have kind of two dual philosophies going on here, and it's a really weird juxtaposition on Cold War being so easy, and then having such punishing enemies and punishing things in the high rounds. And all of those punishing things with the super sprinters and taking your armor and your health so quickly, it means now the safest strategy is no longer training. The safest strategy is now camping with Ring of Fire, or camping with Frost Blast, or the Skrissalax, or the ray gun, or the M79, as everybody likes to point out. And that is interesting. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's bad. It's just a different flavor. And as we discuss all of these high rounds, it's kind of different. You can see what makes somebody successful in the old games, very different than what makes them successful in the current games. But something that they all have in common is patience. And this is something that is really cool because when you look at high round strategies, you can think, oh my goodness, they're just using the Helion Salvo. Oh my goodness, they're just using Ring of Fire. Oh my goodness, they're just using alternate ammo types. Whatever you think, or oh my goodness, they're just using traps back in the day. That takes such persistent, consistent skill and execution. If you slip up, especially in classic zombies, if you slip up once you're on round 100, 200, whatever, it's really life-threatening and it's really difficult because those enemies have infinite damage. You're not going to be able to kill them like you can in Cold War. And if you are in Cold War, they're super punishing, they're super hard, they're going to hit you really hard, they're going to be armored in Cold War. So the stakes are really high. And so for somebody to perform a strategy, however easy or difficult it may seem, is a test of endurance and patience. And throughout all of the high round strategies, that has been what makes high rounders, is their incredibly consistent strategies and execution. It's a beautiful mixture of the knowledge that we talked about. They know about these strategies, they know what to do, they know how to manipulate these spawns, they know what spots to sit on, but also the physical skill of maneuvering in between rounds and around zombies. It's a beautiful thing of what makes good zombie players good. I love it. It's been so great to think about this because it gave me a different level of appreciation of what skill is in zombies. And I used to think high rounds were really fun, but also really tedious. But now I understand that tediousness is just kind of my impatience. It's my lack of commitment of really being good at practicing this one strategy and getting it down perfectly every single time. And that's really darn cool. Now, what's interesting about high rounds is that even if we didn't have super sprinters, even if training was safer like it was back in Black Ops 3 and Classic Zombies, no matter what, the best strategies, the fastest strategies, which people tend to go to because high rounds, of course, is that endurance and patience. So anything to shorten that round time, the faster the zombie spawns, the better the strategy is. Those strategies tend to be camping strategies because the shorter amount of time from when a zombie spawns to when it dies to where it can respawn more zombies, the better, the faster the strategy is. So the best and most efficient strategy is always going to be some sort of camping strategy. And if you're not a fan of that, if you're like me who just loves training, and I absolutely do love training, I don't see a solution to this. Something that Cold War did that I also admired about the high rounds was, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe I heard that there are fewer zombies per round even in the higher rounds of Cold War. So that makes round 100, round 115, 200 a little bit more accessible and a little bit more rewarding. And what that does is that it sort of skews the numbers a little bit more. So it's a little bit easier to get to round 100. It's a little bit easier to get to round 50 and all of that sort of thing. Yes, you're lowering the bar, which I said I didn't like, but I also like the fact that round 100 is no longer like a 4 to 6 hour time commitment. But then again, is that just pandering to a lower audience? Is that me not being skilled enough to go, hey, why aren't I committing 4 to 6 hours to a round 100? Just get better, donuts. That sort of balance is really difficult to have, especially when we talk about these high rounds and these Easter eggs. But as we've been discussing about the general gameplay of zombies, the question is, how do we make high rounds satisfying and engaging to where they're still a challenge and they're not just being handed out to the players at all times like a blue ribbon participation trophy? That is a question, and all of these different aspects with perks in Black Ops 4 and specialists and field upgrades in Cold War and equipment, players are engaging with the sandbox, and I think that is a success. But is that still engaging? How do you punish and hold the players accountable at that high of a round? I think Cold War does it pretty well with the armor and high damage of zombies, but is that the kind of gameplay that players want? What is, and this is a question to you because I don't have the answer to this, what does the ideal high round gameplay look like? What's the fun zone of high round zombies? Because anything I think of is just tedious. It's just the same thing over and over again. Now that might just be because, hey, that's what it's always been. But for a while there, high rounds and surviving rounds was made harder because the boss zombies, and that's something that I haven't touched on all that much, but the boss zombies were supposed to be designed as a boss enemy. It's supposed to be, hey, it's this round, here's a brand new challenge, a way to dynamically change the map. And in Cold War, you have those bosses, and I think some of them are really exceptionally designed, but with Ring of Fire and some of your upgrades and the health cap or whatever, even I would say the tankiest bosses like the Krasny Soldat and the Megaton still feel like they don't change the dynamic of the map all that much. It feels like you still just have to Ring of Fire them with a weapon and you're all good. You're good to go. And I don't know if that's good or not. I legitimately have no idea if that's something, because they still do change the dynamic. You have to focus on them, especially those two. But like a Mangler, a Tempest, they're not, or not a Tempest, whatever the red things are from Mauer. They don't require that much attention, so they don't really dynamically change the game all that much. Is that a success? Is that a failure? Is that just a pest enemy that, kind of grinds out your armor a little bit. I don't know. It's the problem that I've had with high rounds. I don't know what they're supposed to look like. I don't know what would make them really satisfying to play other than what we've had now. And it's just kind of pick whatever level you like. If you like the Black Ops 3 training with the alternate ammo types, great. You love that. If you like Black Ops 4 with its perk setup and different Helion Salvo and Specialists, then go for that. If you like the Cold War camping with kill streaks and Ring of Fire, then go for that. Like, it's such a weird thing, high rounds, and I don't know. Have you guys thought about it? What do you guys think about it? But now let's talk about Easter eggs. Everybody's favorite thing, the heated debate of Easter eggs. This is going to be really fun. And it's going to be a little bit easier here because I'm going to classify everything from World at War to Black Ops 4 as traditional Easter eggs and Cold Wars and Vanguards. Mainly Cold Wars is just Cold Wars Easter eggs. Now you're talking to somebody who started in Black Ops 3, throughout Black Ops 4. I loved Black Ops 4. Never once did any Easter egg in Black Ops 4. Went to Cold War and I did D Machine, I did Firebase C, and I was writing the script. It was like 8 pages of how much I just loved Cold War's Easter eggs. I loved how easy they were. I loved how fair and approachable and balanced they were. And those old traditional Easter eggs were so much harder. They were nonsensical. They didn't make any sense. They were tedious and annoying, and they didn't convey the right amount of information to the player, and all of this stuff. I hated traditional Easter eggs. Well, as you can tell, after Cold War, I went back to Black Ops 4, completed Dead of the Night, 9, Ancient Evil, Alpha Omega, played Black Ops 3, Der Eisendrache. I had done Der Eisendrache before, but I did it again, Zetsubo, and oh my goodness, I was completely wrong. I absolutely loved Dead of the Night. I loved 9. A lot of people said 9 was like one of the hardest, most intense Easter eggs. It's probably one of my favorite. I love the challenge in those Easter eggs. I absolutely loved Ancient Evil's Easter eggs. So freaking cool. And now going back, even Legion to me feels pretty easy. But here's the weird thing. Here's the thing that's just the aha gotcha moment, because you could use that and say, well, Cold War's Easter eggs are just so terrible. They're so bad. They're not replayable. But if it weren't for Cold War and Cold War's Easter eggs, and maybe even the overall gameplay of Cold War being so easy, I might not have developed the confidence and the skill to go back and play those old Easter eggs. It might be because of Cold War's accessibility that I am able to go back and complete those main quests and play those games at a higher level. That being said, I want to say when I did go back and I played a handful of Black Ops 4's Easter eggs, I still need to play like Blood of the Dead and Voyage and Tag, and try Classified, I guess. But when approaching those Easter eggs, one of the biggest challenges wasn't the physical gameplay of those Easter eggs. It was watching the guide and the mental barrier of, oh my goodness, what do? I have to do it this way. It felt so overwhelming. It wasn't that it was overwhelming. It wasn't like, oh my goodness, I'm juggling all of these pieces and parts. No, you could take your time back in these traditional Easter eggs, but watching the guide itself felt overwhelming. And that is probably the biggest barrier to entry for a lot of people. It's the mental component. It's the fact that that sounds like a lot to do, but once you get in game and you do it, it's pretty fun. It's really fun, actually, and it's really easy. Now, of course, there's still challenges like the raw steps in Ancient Evil and 9, and the Dead of the Night lockdowns are still pretty challenging and all that stuff. The Red Nova Crawler, the lockdown, the Alpha Omega, there's still challenge in there that's more challenging than Cold War. And the lengths of those Easter eggs in Black Ops 4 and Black Ops 3 way longer than any of the quests in Cold War. So there's definitely more actual physical and gameplay challenges. But I think the biggest one for me was a mental challenge of, hey, I've just got to do it. The clock step is really throwing me in Voyage right now. For like 2 weeks, I've been like, I'm going to play Voyage, I'm going to do the Easter egg, but then I look up the guide and I do the clock step and I'm like, I don't know if I can do it. I hear it's a nightmare. I don't want to do it. I'm positive as soon as I do it, it's going to be like the scratch mark step in Dead of the Night where it sounds overly daunting and oh my goodness. And then you do it and you're like, oh, that was like really easy. So, because it's going to be on one round with like one zombie following you and it's just, you write down what it is. It's going to be easy. I need to do it. But that's the mental component that stops players from completing these Easter eggs. And that's a very real thing that Treyarch has to acknowledge. I think there was I know for a fact that there was an article written after I think Firebase C was released from Treyarch saying that like 2% of players completed Easter eggs in Black Ops 4. That's insane to think about, isn't it? 2% of players actually completed Easter eggs. Now, Think about it this way. What if, new Call of Duty comes out and 2% of players finish the campaign? Not because of lack of interest, not because of lack of desire, but just because the campaign was that difficult and that challenging and that ambiguous that only 2% of players actually managed to watch a guide and make it all the way through the end. That would be a terrible campaign. That would be a terrible game design philosophy, wouldn't it? And you're right. And that's why we got what we got in Cold War, because they wanted more than 2% of the player base to experience the beauty of Easter eggs. And I think that has a lot of merit in everything we've talked about so far today. I think not a lot of people did high rounds before, but they do in Cold War. I think not a lot of people played zombies, but they do in Cold War. So yes, I feel like Cold War is a little bit too accessible at times, but I also think you need that accessibility in some way, shape, or form to get players comfortable with the mode. Because hopefully, like me, once they experience Cold War, they'll have a desire and the skill to go back and play those other maps, and maybe a little bit more confidence to complete those Easter eggs too, or high rounds or gameplay or whatever it may be. But then you have to ask a question, something that I've asked in this podcast before. Is people completing Easter eggs mean or equate to a successful zombies mode? Because as we've discussed, your level of skill and your level of fun in zombies may not be tied directly to the Easter eggs. You're looking at the guy, one of the biggest Black Ops 4 fanboys right here, never did an Easter egg during its life cycle. That's kind of crazy to think about. That's kind of insane, but the core gameplay of the zombie mode was enough for me to say, hey, that mode's fun, I really like it. And so many other people feel that way about zombies too. We just want to, not we, but a lot of people are just like, we just want to get our gun, get pack-a-punch, and kill zombies. That's such a common sentiment with the casual or larger, probably casual community in zombies. They just want pack-a-punch, their perks, and kill zombies. And so even the Easter eggs in Cold War is like, why would I do that? That's not what I'm playing this mode for. I don't care about, finding the mimic and inputting this code and doing this thing. Like, yeah, that's cool for other people, but not for me. And that's the cool thing about zombies, is that we have a game where the objective of the game can be so different for so many people. It's why games like Minecraft have been so successful, because there is no for sure end game. And also, I think it might be why Outbreak might not work, because if there's one objective, then if you're not interested in that objective, who really cares? So it's great that we're being more accessible with Easter eggs. It's great that we're being more accessible with high rounds, but I think it's also important. It's an important thing to say and recognize, especially Treyarch Zombies people. It's not the success or the failure of your zombies game if X amount of people don't get to this round, or X amount of people don't get to this main quest. Sometimes the gameplay of just surviving zombies and killing zombies is enough for a lot of people. But talking back more about Easter eggs, I think this is probably one of the most difficult things Treyarch has on their plate right now. And I have absolutely no idea what they're going to do with this, because even back in the day, even when I thought the Easter eggs were really tedious and unintuitive, which they are, even back in the day, I so passionately loved, especially during Black Ops 4, the Easter egg hunts. I think the Easter egg hunts is such a unique aspect to the zombies community that it is so worth preserving. When Cold War came out and everybody just found the Easter egg within a couple hours, it felt like the community didn't have something bringing us together. Previous Easter eggs, because they were so poorly designed, it brought the community together. Everybody was looking on forum posts, on Reddit, on YouTube channels, looking at Noah's stream. Hey, did we find anything today? Hey, what's going on with this? One of my best, most favorite zombies memories ever is when Black Ops 4 came out. And everyone says they hated this, but this is great. I loved this. When we had 4 maps and we were looking at 4 maps, and you were looking at this person playing this map, and then you'd hear, oh, so we made progress on Blood. So you'd switch over to this streamer and you'd watch them play Blood of the Dead. And oh my goodness, what do we find? Okay, they're doing it. Oh, hey, Admiral Baru is in the boss fight of Voyage. Oh my goodness, let's go see him. Oh my goodness, he crashed. Oh, we're doing more Blood stuff. Hey, we're doing more 9 stuff. Hey, I loved the week-long gauntlet of the community coming together and finding stuff out about these maps and discovering these maps. And, ooh, this could be an Easter egg. There's such a level of intrigue and copium, you could even say, hope that there is something cool assigned with this thing of the map? And what does this little item do on this side of the map? And oh my goodness, this totally looks like an Easter egg. But once the Easter egg is solved right away, it's almost like, oh, okay, well then we've kind of figured out 90% of the map already. Even if there's a lot of side quests, even if there's a lot of other things, that main quest hunt is so special. Revelations is a great example because it took us forever. And not many people, people love to hate the Black Ops 3 and Black Ops 4 Easter eggs. They love, oh, it's so stupid and tedious. They're so poorly designed. But that is kind of the point, right? And when you have a community like, well, any community, but especially the zombies community, where you challenge us with, hey, we're going to throw in this impossible Easter egg. We're going to throw in this really hard challenge. It's going to take you guys a week to find this Easter egg. With Revelations, that was peak level of that sentiment in the community. That was peak level of, people trashed Zetsbo when it came out because it took like 20 something hours to find. 20 something hours to find would be amazing for a Cold War map. But when Zetsbo was released, oh my goodness, less than a day and we found the Easter egg. Oh my goodness, how horrible. But with Revelations, we saw the consequence of that sort of mindset. And they said, hey, if you really want it to take a while, we're going to put a random rock and a teleporter that automatically teleports you to the next rock in the map. And that's step number 1, right? Step number 4, you're going to find this bone in this rock, but you have to shoot the rock first and then you have to get the apothecary. It's bad game design. It's objectively bad game design, but Treyarch knew that. That was the purpose. It wasn't supposed to be, it wasn't supposed to make sense. It wasn't supposed to be like, oh, this step is done. Now I know exactly what we need to do for this next step. Because if that were the case, then we would figure it out in mere hours, which is exactly what happened with Cold War. And so when they did that, everyone found it out really quickly and we didn't really have that much of a hunt. So there's this duality where if we want a really long hunt and a community to come together and figure things out, it's probably going to mean that the Easter egg is very unintuitive and random and have really bad steps, and it's going to be not really fun to complete. Or if it makes a lot of sense and it is a lot of fun and it's intuitive, then it's probably not going to take a long time to figure out. And I have absolutely no idea how Treyarch could resolve that paradox, honestly, because I don't think there's a happy middle. I don't think there's like a sort of challenging Easter egg that takes us a little bit of time. When you think about how many people are in the zombies community, how many people are watching Noah's streams and Mr. Waffle Waffle streams and everybody's streams and Smart Guy streams, and you combine that with people online and people at home, there's thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of hours worth of game time trying to, in this one map alone, in this one section. Of course, somebody's going to randomly shoot this and stumble upon that. It's a miracle when any map takes longer than a day to figure out. I don't know how Treyarch's going to do it. I personally think the idea for, well, I guess going into the future, this is kind of the sneak peek at the end of the video, the key is balance. You need your simple, easy Derizen Draha type of Easter eggs and Cold War style of Easter eggs, but sometimes throw in a Gorod Krovi, sometimes throw in a Shadows of Evil, or even a little hint of a Revelations. Throw in those little tiny things in there to make us earn it. I love the variety that we have in older games like Black Ops 4 and Black Ops 3, and here's the cool thing. Here's a weird thing I thought about this. And this is something that's not just Easter eggs, but all of Cold War and the general gameplay. Cold War is universally easy. There's not a map like Shangri-La, right? You think about and think about the actual physical map layout of these Cold War maps. They're all wide open pathways, really, really wide, wider than even Blundell's maps. They're super wide, easy to train, easy to micromanage your zombies around. If we had something like Shangri-La or Voyage of Despair, would the community feel satisfied with that sort of difficulty? Maybe. And then extending that to Easter eggs, if we had a Revelations or a Dead of the Night or a 9 style of Easter egg where it was really long and a gameplay challenged focus killed like the raw steps on Ancient Evil and 9. If we had those in Cold War Zombies, with the same mechanics and the same things, the same overpowered stuff, would the zombies community feel different about Cold War? I think they might. I think that's something that they could really put into their next game, even if they don't want to change the difficulty too much. Everyone always says that the perfect Easter egg step is the hardest to figure out and the easiest to replicate. And there are great examples of that throughout the zombies' history, but those are probably really difficult to come up with. And not only that, But there are certain Easter eggs, like Blood of the Dead's, for example, that are so hard and so tedious that without even changing the Easter egg steps themselves, those sorts of Easter eggs within Cold War's mechanics might be 1,000 times easier and more enjoyable even. For example, everyone's favorite Morse code step. The worst thing about that Morse code step is that when you're trying to figure out the Morse code or you're trying to input the Morse code, you've got zombies hitting you on your back and annoying you, and you're going to go down, you're trapped in this corner. But in Cold War, every single time one of those types of steps comes in where you have to interact with something, zombies ignore you. So could you imagine in Black Ops 4 doing the Morse code step on Black Ops 4, once you interact with that telegraph or whatever that thing is called, the zombies ignore you. That step would be so much better. Here's another example of just how simple gameplay mechanics, universal gameplay mechanics, could make that Blood of the Dead Easter egg a little bit better. Every single shield on Black Ops 4 comes default with some amount of ammo. On Ancient Evil, you got the spears. On like every other one, you have the gun with ammo in it. But on Blood of the Dead, you don't get any shield blasts from just having the shield. And in Blood of the Dead, half of the Easter egg is shield blasts. So how crazy would it be if by default you had like 10 shield blasts, and in order to get more shield blasts, yes, you could use the key and suck up the souls and all that stuff, but instead of that, or in addition to that, you could just go to the buildable table and buy more. How much easier and less tedious does that Easter egg step become, and how much more enjoyable does that overall Easter egg become? Without even changing a single step of the Easter egg, that Easter egg is way more accessible and way more fun. It's thoughts like that that make me encouraged and think, yeah, Treyarch is probably smart enough to actually figure out that delicate balance between the ease of Cold War and the challenge and difficulty of the more traditional Easter eggs. And it's those sorts of things that make me not feel any shame whatsoever. In fact, I encourage you to complete those Easter eggs with some elixirs equipped and some mega elixirs equipped. I love Undead Man Walking, I love In Plain Sight, and I love max ammos and all of that sort of stuff. I love the overpowered stuff. I love the stuff that really makes it just a little bit better of a gameplay experience because they're meant to be fun. And as a side note, Gobblegums and Elixirs, I didn't talk about it in difficulty because the core gameplay, and I've always thought this, and this is a different topic for a different day. I could talk so much about Gobblegums and Elixirs, but you can earn them in-game without paying a dime. I've earned all of my elixirs in Black Ops 4 without paying for them. So is it pay to win? I honestly don't think so. But I think they're a wonderful tool in addition to the base gameplay to make it more enjoyable towards your preferences. I love that when I'm camo grinding, I can put on max ammo or alchemical antithesis and get that sort of side of the game, that ammo management part of the game that I don't like. It's a little bit more enjoyable so that I can enjoy the rest of the game that I actually do enjoy. And do not feel any shame in bringing in an In Plain Sight or an Undead Man Walking into any of these Easter eggs. It's not pay to win. It's not cheap. It's fun. And have fun with whatever you have fun with. The difficulty of zombies as a whole is so difficult and interesting to talk about because it's not a linear thing. The physical play space of a map has a huge impact, as well as how much damage zombies do, as well as what tools you have to your expenses and what weapons you start with and field upgrades and specialist and the rampage and all of these different things contribute to a zombies game difficulty. It's not like you can have a dial that changes these things. And in fact, in Black Ops 4, the difficulty settings is really just a health and enemy damage modifier. Like in casual, the enemies are really slow and weak and you're really strong. In hardcore, the enemies are really strong and have a lot of health, and you're really weak. And that's really the only difference there. Like, it doesn't change the Easter egg steps to make them any harder. It doesn't change the side quest to Easter eggs to make them any more challenging. No, it's just the core gameplay that's a little bit more or less punishing. And so, when talking about difficulty in such broad terms, like Cold War's so easy, I think it does it a disservice, which is why I have this super long podcast talking about it. If Cold War had more challenge in it, I feel it wouldn't have the bad reputation of being too easy or too accessible. But unfortunately, I think Cold War did in fact take a step too far into the accessibility category. Don't get me wrong, they did. I don't think people realize how successful Cold War Zombies is. I don't think people realize how many more players played Cold War, how many multiplayer players came over because of how accessible it was. it became a smash hit, one of the best zombie releases ever in terms of popularity and gameplay and Outbreak and all that sort of stuff. But at what cost? I don't see a future where Cold War Zombies is looked back on as fondly as something like Black Ops 3, even in my eyes, Black Ops 4, but I know I'm just a weirdo. I feel like it's around Black Ops 1 where I hope that there is a future zombie title that kind of tweaks Cold War's mechanics a little bit, makes them a little bit more in line with a traditional zombies experience or more challenging zombies experience, more balanced zombies experience. And we look at Cold War and we go, hey, that was a good rough draft. That was a really good start, but this is even better because this has that, but it's even better here. And that's what I hope Cold War ages as. I don't think it's aging well because there's no big challenge. There's no real reason to say, hey, I want to go back and beat all of these Easter eggs with this sort of thing. You know, maybe the Rampage Inducer, but other than that, there's really not much there to challenge at least the hardcore zombie players. It's a great way to get introduced to zombies, not a great way for experienced zombie players to find a challenge. And the scary thing about this is that I don't know if both sides of this argument can be happy. I don't know if the people who love Cold War and think it's the perfect difficulty can ever play the same game as, you know, the classic and traditional Easter eggs and high rounds and gameplay of Black Ops 3 and Black Ops 4 can get along. I don't know if there's a happy in between. I really hope there is, and I hope this is, like I said before, this is going to be the biggest challenge that Treyarch has on their plate going forward. How do you introduce this audience of Cold War to a harder challenge while retaining that player retention and also making the experienced zombie players happy? I think there might have to be difficulty settings. Maybe not 4 like Black Ops 4, maybe just 2. Just, hey, this is your casual Cold War experience, and this is your more traditional Black Ops 3, Black Ops 4 experience. But other than that, I have no idea. Hey, here's an easy Easter egg, as well as on the same map a hard Easter egg because we're catering to 2 different players. I don't think that's feasible. I don't think Treyarch coming up with 2 completely different Easter eggs for every single map and every single experience is something that's feasible or viable for them in their state and their whatever development time they've had for this next game. So it really is kind of scary to me to think, hey, is this next game going to be even easier than Cold War? Or are they going to really perfect this balance and have something in between? Not as hard as the Blood of the Dead Morse code step, but not as easy as like the entirety of Cold War. That would be amazing. What I would absolutely hate for zombies to do is appeal to the lowest common denominator. I feel like this happens a little bit with 6v6. I feel like that's what the skill-based matchmaking or engagement-based matchmaking is, whatever. I feel like that's an algorithm based on statistics on who gets the most playtime to get the most players. And that sort of mindset of, hey, we're going to design a game to get the most players, I don't think is healthy. I want you to design a zombies game to make the best type of zombies game that you want to make. However easy or difficult or challenging that may be, so be it. Doom Eternal is one of my favorite first-person shooters of all time, but it forces you to play in a specific way. It forces you and it holds you accountable to be within this fun zone. Now, the bet of that is that the fun zone is really freaking fun, which it is in Doom Eternal. And the fun zone of zombies, of killing zombies and overcoming these challenges, is also really freaking fun. And I don't want that experience to be cheapened just so that more players can play it. You will get more loyal audiences who know that they need to be better players in order to become successful at the game. You will have more loyal communities and more positive communities when you have that sort of challenge and accountability within your game. I've been thinking about this a little bit. You see, Mr. Beast is the biggest YouTuber, but he's not the best zombies YouTuber. He's not the best fashion YouTuber. He's not the best gaming YouTuber. Mr. Beast appeals to as big of an audience as possible because he wants to be the biggest YouTuber. Whereas me or somebody else, I don't know, but me, I don't want to be the biggest YouTuber. I want to be the best YouTuber that I can be, which has limitations, which has an end goal of a reach. There's not an audience beyond zombies that I'm appealing to right now. I'm not appealing to the Minecrafters right now. I'm not appealing to maybe a little bit of the Doom people. Hey, Doom people. But there is limitations for that. And with Activision especially, I don't want zombies to become that gateway to just, nope, appeal to everybody, appeal to the lowest common denominator, and sacrifice what makes the zombie mode so special for so many people. So, is Cold War Zombies too easy? What makes a good zombie player a good zombie player? Hopefully, we touched on a little bit of that today. And if you're still having trouble with some of these boss fights here in Cold War, check out that video and stay beautiful.